I have 7 o'clock.
I didn't do that one.
I'll call the March 20th, 2023 meeting to order. First item on the agenda is your approval. Patrick, any changes?
No changes from staff, Mr. Chair.
The board have anything?
No.
Hearing none, I need a motion to approve.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. Item 3 is approval of payment of the bills. Did you sign up?
I did move to approve payment of the bills.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Item 4 is the approval of minutes from March 6, 2023. I know it was a lot of reading there.
Say there must be several minutes missing. It's only 3 minutes.
I can't believe anybody has any changes. I need a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, item 5 is the consent agenda. The board, please. We okay with them?
I will move to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. All right, item 6 is old business. We have none, so we're going to move to number 7 is the public hearing. This is for Capital Industrial, 5300 Centerville Road. I need a motion to open the continuation of this public hearing.
I'll move to open the continuation of the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Evan, you going to give us a recap here? Or?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. You may recall about 6 months ago now, the town board approved their preliminary plat as well as a wetland permit and a permitted use standards request for an industrial development on the southwest side of the township. The developer has not yet pursued the final plat, and so none of the work associated with the wetland permit has since commenced. Back when this was approved, there was a 6-month continuation for that wetland permit, which is why we're holding this tonight. We haven't received any feedback from the applicant on whether they wish for another extension or not. So tonight, the town board does have the option to either extend again to see if the developer finishes the project, or you can declare the request essentially to be lapsed, and then it would be null and void at that point.
Evan, did they solicit us for the 6 month?
We monitor the 6-month timeline, and so this is just a continuation based on our timelines.
They are aware that it was for a period of 6.
Patty notified them, and obviously when it was approved, we gave them the documentation noting the 6 months continuation, so.
With no response.
Correct.
Chad, can we legally give them then another 6 months?
You can, yes, or you can simply declare it lapsed. I mean, yeah, Evan set your options out pretty clearly. And put it in there correct.
I would also, Evan, if the plan changes at all, they would have to reapply for this, correct?
Correct.
Basically start over.
Correct. So say they were to come up with a preliminary plat, but there's changes that were different from the preliminary, you'd have to amend that and then probably amend this permit as well, so.
Kind of your safety net.
Well, didn't the original plan not show one of the turn lanes? I believe it was southbound.
I recall there was some issues with the turn lanes in the
I
county.
don't think it was ever put on the plat, correct?
We had requested as a condition of approval that be added in.
Okay, so if that were to be added, would that alter the road right away and encroach in any of the wetland?
It could potentially.
So without seeing a final plat with that on there, we couldn't proceed anyway.
Correct. I think the idea was, in theory, they were going to be moving through the process, and by this point, they would have submitted their plat showing the updated plans, addressing the comments from the watershed, from the county, et cetera. At this point, though, they haven't actually pursued anything, so we're just kind of sitting here with nothing changed from back then.
Well, Mr. Chair, from my perspective, they've taken no action. Why would we not just declare it lapsed and let them start over?
Mr. Chad, could staff reach out to them tomorrow and say the board could pull this permit from you? Do you wish to proceed under your present plan?
Well, unfortunately, you're at a deadline, so you pretty much have to make the decision tonight.
I think we should be concerned over what the chair pointed out, that we've not seen their plans for the road right away, and which would require it anyway if it enters into the wetlands. So why not just pause?
I'm not stepping on your statement there, Steve, but just to make sure we're clear, the road right away was that a staff request?
That was county.
Okay.
Because Centerville is a county road, so.
Right. So it
wasn't our
but what I mean is that we're not going to be able to proceed without that in place.
Correct.
We've told them that beforehand.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Well, then, Evan, too, I know there was a question, especially concerning the neighbors to the north of a tree preserve. Was that designated on the plan? Was that actually outlined on the plan?
Probably not on the preliminary, no. It would have been the final plat. We would have had that.
Which we don't have.
Which we don't have.
Which is another reason that we're not.
We keep coming back.
There's a common theme that you've found here.
Anything else that's not on the final plat?
The pause of this was not our doing. The pause was clearly the developer, and so I think we've bent as far as we can bend without having more specifics, and I think we should. I already made my position clear.
All right, well, does the board have any other questions to Evan or Chad? Then I need a motion move to open for public portion.
I'll move to open the public comment portion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Is there anyone here that would wish to speak about the Capital Industries, 5300 Centerville Road? Seeing none, I need a motion to close.
I'll move to close the public portion of the hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, unless there's any further discussion, what's the pleasure of the board?
Well, I'll move based on my review. I don't know if it's staff review and recommendations that no work has been performed. I think we can all agree with that, but I declare that the wetland permit request to be lapsed and the applicant be required to reapply when the work is commenced.
Second.
I would just make one recommendation. The wetland permit was applied for and okayed for what the original plan was.
True.
But if there's any alterations, then the wetland permit would have to be resubmitted.
Correct.
But other than that, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. You can let them know tomorrow. I would have thought they would have been here tonight to at least state their case.
We have extended plenty of opportunity here.
All right, moving on. We have public hearing for the wellhead protection plan. And there again, I need a motion to waive the reading.
I'll move to waive the reading that it was properly published in the newspaper.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And then I need a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll move to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, who's handling this?
Matt.
You want to come up to the podium, just introduce yourself and your address for the record?
Yep, good evening, supervisors. My name is Matt Ellingson with TKDA. I'm consultant working on this wellhead protection plan. I'll give you a brief history of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going for this plan. So this is the public hearing for the Part 2 of the plan. So these wellhead protection plans are split into Part 1 and Part 2. I was in front of you, I believe it was 15 months ago after the Part 1 approval. So the Part 1 of the wellhead protection plan looks at where does our drinking water come from. So it's looking at the capture area, looking at the hydrology, the geology, also the vulnerability. So that's the Part 1. So it really establishes this wellhead protection area. So part of that wellhead protection area is it's an irregular shaped jurisdiction. So we just define what is called the Drinking Water Supply Management Area, or DWSMA, as you might hear me reference later for short. So that's really the Part 1. So it was approved late 2021. With that, Health Department kicks off the Part 2 report, which really looks at, we know where the water comes from, so we're looking at the vulnerabilities, looking at land use, looking at potential contaminant sources. So we're inventorying items such as wells and storage tanks, think of like a gas station, looking at state databases for spills. So it's inventorying all these, and there's a map I included in the packet kind of showing some of those potential contaminant sources. And one thing I just want to note is that water doesn't follow a political boundary. So one of the other exhibits that we're required to submit to the health department is a map of political boundaries. So all the adjacent cities, I believe there are 6, including the township, as well as the counties that have jurisdiction. So both Ramsey and Washington counties for land use within this DWISMA area. And there are also in fact, 3 watershed districts. So part of this plan is we meet all the requirements that the health department has, basically a checklist of sorts, information to submit, and we have to submit our draft plan to all these local units of government that have jurisdiction in this area. So it's working, with the cities of White Bear Lake, Gem Lake, Delwood, Grant, Birchwood Village, as well as the counties and the watershed districts, providing them a 60-day period that ended today for any comments. To date, have received, I think, 5 comments from the entities ranging from "we have no comment, good job," to "hey, maybe you want to include this. We have a program at the watershed that maybe you want to consider," to actually working with the health department, who has the authority to actually approve this plan, to say, hey, there's a couple deficiencies that maybe you need to include a different figure or expand on this. So that's where we're at right now. So this portion of the public hearing opens it up to anyone in attendance, any questions the town board would have. We take all comments received, work with staff, work with Dale Reed and his staff to come up with any edits that need to be made for this plan. One thing I do want to note is that these wellhead protection plans are a 10-year project. So it's something that we have to have implementation items, think of like educational items, best management practices, putting information on the town board website, working with these storage tank owners, notifying first responders that this is our wellhead protection area. If there's a spill or a contamination event, that maybe extra care needs to be provided, to prevent contamination of the groundwater. So it's laying out kind of this 10-year time of travel that we're looking at, this 10-year plan. So we take all these comments, we submit to the health department, which should be by the end of this week. They have 90 days to review, and then they come back with either their approval or any other additional information that they would like us to include in that plan. Once the plan does get approved, we do have to notify all the local units of government again, so the cities, counties, watershed districts, that we are going to start implementing the plan. So it's something that staff will work on over this 10-year time of travel. So with that, I'll open up for any questions first from the board, and then step aside if there are any other public comments here.
On the comments from either the Department of Health or other municipalities, was there any major theme of anything they thought we needed to include or address?
So for example, also Metropolitan Council had a couple, like the implementation, maybe some programs that they have. They're responsible for, the whole county land use planning, kind of long-term population planning. So there's some programs that they have that maybe we could kind of tap into. So it's a lot of the stuff that, the township, the staff is actively doing, so it's working with planning, looking at land use. That was another comment from one of the watershed districts that, hey, we have this program that, this would be a good application. So it's, something like that. Washington County had a comment to reference the county's groundwater plan. So they're, kind of stuff that we can kind of piggyback on stuff that has already been done. And then the comments from the health department were like, we needed like a township range section map, kind of expanding on some of the text in the actual report, maybe just providing a little bit more detail, or, maybe we went into too much detail on the case that we don't need that. This is a 10-year plan, so something that we did 10 years ago may not be the same as today based on changes in the geology that we know from the plan. So this is something why it's done every 10 years, because we get more information. So overall, I'd say they're very minor comments that easily addressed.
So this follows right along with the Met Council 10-year comprehensive plan. You mentioned the Met Council, so
Yep.
it seems to be about the same time frame and time period.
Correct.
So it's integrated within that for their
There are
perspective.
definitely pieces that interlock. It is a standalone separate, so this is run through the Minnesota Health Department. But there are definitely, the land use planning, the kind of the long-term community planning that Met Council does get involved with, looking at. And that was one of their comments, I believe, was that it does follow in line with their comp plan, basically what they're looking at for forecasting.
Thank you.
Looking at this DWISMA map.
Yep.
The colors are a little fuzzy at points, but it looks to me as though there's several potential contamination sites and a couple spills that are listed on here. It doesn't
Yes.
say any date, so I don't know if they're last year or 10 years ago.
Yep.
Is there any kind of remediation plans for these spills and potential contaminations?
Short answer, yes. There is actually a table that goes along with this. It doesn't get into details as far as like dates, but it has, is the activity closed? Is it like a gas station, like a leaking underground storage tank? Has it been removed? Has it been remediated? So it is looking at, potential like petroleum brownfields, looking at leak sites, looking at Superfund sites, basically taking an inventory of those items. So these are all just things that we have to inventory and then provide the implementation items to say, hey, this is a priority for the township. We want to make sure that if these haven't been closed, that we work with the appropriate, whether it's EPA or MPCA, whoever the regulatory authority is, to make sure that they're not going to have an impact on the groundwater supply.
So really, you're trying to map all these wells where people are getting drinking water with these spills or potential spills to see what's the potential impact to those using the wells. And if it's a private well, how do they find out about the spills and contaminations?
So there are programs that, they're, obviously beyond the jurisdiction of the township, but through the health department, there is testing available. So what this exercise is really looking at is listing, all the private wells, that have the ability to impact the aquifer that the township draws their well water for, the municipal water from. So one, for example, in there is the water gremlin site, and so that's something that, we state in the plan, it's working with health department, piggybacking again on the testing that they're doing and continuing to support that. And, we're not here to point the finger and say this is the cause of it. So what we're doing is inventorying these are potential contaminant sources for the groundwater. So it's coming up with programs to try and mitigate that, educational materials as far as, letting residents know about the resources that are available. So back to the wells, if there's someone that has city water available to them now that didn't previously, there can actually be cost share funds, through both of the counties to seal their private well, so there's not a cross-contamination event. So we don't really have the jurisdiction to reach out, for those as part of this to say, a lot of this information is available in the public realm through state databases. So if that's something that they did have a question on and reached out to staff, that is something that we can definitely point them in the direction and provide that information where they can find that online as well.
Thank you.
With the Minnesota Department of Health, did they do any water sampling with this protection plan?
Not directly as part of this, but that's part of, like daily operation.
I know that our Public Works keeps tabs on that quite a bit, but I was just
Yes.
curious if because it seems like every year there's a new chemical we should be looking for. And I was wondering if they had any insight or with that, but if they didn't do any testing, that wouldn't matter.
Not directly, but one of the implementation items specifically does address, maybe the PFAS that we've been seeing, mainly in the East Metro, looking at some of these contaminants of concern and working with the health department to establish a testing plan, particularly, with the water gremlin site and how close that is to well 5, which is of course the best producing well here in the township with the treatment plant there. And to date, just want to reiterate that there has been no contamination shown above regulatory health-based guidance limits. So that's something that the township will continue to work at a public works level with the health department on.
Actually, this may be a question for Patrick, but do we have a link on our website for someone who would want to have their well independently tested? So there's someplace they can go to call? Okay. All right, any other questions,
So
Matthew?
some of the data that you get, because you mentioned water gremlin, is from the testing wells that they have implemented around that facility as a result of their other issues?
Correct, and part of the, so Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has a website. It's very helpful. It's called What's in My Neighborhood. So it's a web-based, like a GIS platform that anyone can go on and you can search in your neighborhood and you can see, what the storage tanks are, what are, some of these cleanup sites, what kind of chemicals are at these facilities. It doesn't give you a whole lot of information. It'll tell you the quantity. Is it a 10,000 gallon tank? Is it a 1,000 gallon tank? Then also the Minnesota Department of Health has a well database. So you can look up non-municipal, like private wells. And that's how we get a lot of that data is from these state databases. So we go through that, we kind of vet that information, make sure it's current, verify the status as best we can with the information that is provided from these state databases. And also it's relying on, staff knowledge and, from the report we did 10 years ago, say, hey, we knew about this issue, based on staff knowledge. So it's taking that into consideration as well, adding in, hey, we knew about this site 10 years ago. It may be applicable today as well.
Well, Steve? Yeah. All right, thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
All right, hearing no other questions from the board, I need a motion to open up for public comment.
I'll move to open the public part of the comment for the hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carried. Anyone wish to speak to this? Any water experts in the crowd? Hearing none, I need a motion to close.
I'll move to close the public portion of the hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, what's the pleasure of the board?
Well, I'll move based on the town engineer and staff review and recommendations, receive the White Bear Township Wellhead Protection Plan Part 2.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you much. Good evening.
All right, moving on to new business. Daniel Maher, 2592 Blueville Circle, request for an amendment to ordinance number 47. Evan, you gonna take this for us, an overview?
Yeah, I can start, and if Chad wants to fill in, he certainly can. We had an ordinance amendment request a few months ago from our applicant, who is here tonight, and he'll obviously answer some questions here later on, but he's looking to amend the housing ordinance. You may recall from our discussion at the exec board meeting, the housing ordinance states the maximum number of people that can constitute one family within the township. That is at 5 unrelated persons. What Mr. Maher is looking to do is amend that to allow for more than 5 people. He's looking to run what's called a sober house out of a residence here in the township. If this amendment were allowed, he could have up to 10 people, is what he's looking to have for an amendment. Basically, the options tonight are to either amend the ordinance to increase that number of 5 up to a higher number if desired, or essentially the township can keep the ordinance as is. So I'll let Chad maybe counter or fill in on some more of the legal items as well.
Evan, our ordinance does allow for halfway houses, and that's up to 5.
Correct.
So sober house, we don't even have a definition for it in our ordinance. Questions, comments? Steve?
No.
All right, Chad, I know you had kind of put together a summary here for us. You want to just give us an overview of what you found?
Well, basically, I mean, alcoholism is considered to be a disability. And as such, under the Federal Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act, the town is required to make accommodations. And the question is, would increasing above 5 be a required accommodation? And is that really that simple? Can a sober house operate successfully at the 5-person limit?
Well, me personally, I know a couple things come to mind. 10 people in one home actually goes way past our ordinance for
Unrelated.
R1, R2, I'm missing the word.
Right, so the zoning ordinance basically states, R1 is single family.
The density.
R2 is
It's-
two
it's-
family.
It's out of our density,
Right, and so our zoning kind of pulls from the housing ordinance, that family definition.
right?
If I may, R1, you could have, could have up to 2 dwellings in R1 with a conditional use permit.
And then you, on top of that, with a number of 10, most houses aren't equipped to have 10 vehicles, so parking could be an issue. I worry about another enforcement by our code enforcement officer, 'cause this is a hard one to monitor. I mean, we have kind of a tough time even monitoring rental houses that have 2 people in it. And then even if we were to do this, I worry about a precedence that this is going to carry on to more issues. I don't want to go into depth on that, but I just feel we're already having homes that will take 5 people on. 10 just seems like an extreme amount to expect especially neighboring residents to put up with.
Well, again, you could, if an application was made in an R1 zone for 2 dwellings, which would allow for 10 people, it is a conditional use permit, it is a conditional use, which means you'd have the right to tailor conditions to meet the neighborhood.
But would a duplex fall in an R1?
Again, yes, at R1, a duplex is allowed in R1 as a conditional use.
Okay. All right, I know the applicant's here. You want to come up and introduce yourself and state your name and address?
Dan Maher with 2592 Bluebill Circle.
I know I at least brought up a few issues, and I know this is getting some headwind in St. Paul, but I guess I can't speak for the other 2 board members, but I'm not real comfortable. You got to give me a sales pitch here.
Okay. Well, and that's why I brought a couple of different people here that are also involved in sober housing, because you've already heard some of my things already, and I thought I'd have them come and help explain to you a little bit more about what the benefits are of having more than 5 people in a sober home. I mean, I was told by your building inspector the house was big enough that I could put 18 people in it because of the square footage. So I'm not asking for that, I'm asking for 10 because it's a more of a community when you have 7, 8, 9 men working together for the same common goal of staying sober. And it builds more community by having that other number. If you wouldn't mind.
If you just want to state your name and address.
Yep, my name is Randy Young. My address is 1552 Snelling Avenue North in St. Paul. I am actually the current president of the Minnesota Association of Sober Homes, better known as MASH. Just recently elected, so I'm really kind of new at all this. But I've been in sober housing for over 20 years. I own 3 houses myself. One of the houses I've got 12 guys at. Another house I've got, it's a 7-bedroom, actually an 8-bedroom house. Another one of the houses I've got 7. And one of the houses I only have 4. And the one that has 4 is only 2 doors down from the one that has 7. So those 2 work together, and we have our house meetings together. It's therapeutic for 11 guys working together. 4 guys is very difficult. It's just, or less, or 5. A therapeutic number for sober housing as far as the relationships, as far as the support, as far as the community is 10 would be an optimum number, actually. 5 is too few. 18 is probably too many, because then it's chaos. But you have to understand, most of these gentlemen it'll be a men's house. Most of these gentlemen are either enrolled in an intense outpatient program, or they're working full time, or a combination of working part time while they're doing some outside therapy. So they're not all home at one time, except probably in the evening. And so during the day, if somebody's around, you need more people actually for the therapeutic value of a sober house. Chris has also been in sober housing for a long time. He might also speak to that idea of the reason for the therapeutic numbers that we've talked about and why they exist, because it's been a fair amount of research, and we've been doing this for a long time. The other sales pitch I'm going to give you is my story about my house that has 11 guys in it. It's 719 Stewart in just off of West 7th Street area in St. Paul. And the house next door to me came up for sale. And it was a young lady. She was a single mom. She was an attorney, and she was concerned about buying the house next door to a sober house. She had a little girl, Charlotte, when she bought that house, was about 3 years old. And she decided she loved the house. I met with her, assured her if there's any issues or problems to certainly let me know. We will be there. We will, whatever. We want to make sure that the house is safe, it's clean, it's well maintained. They're going to be good neighbors. And if you have a problem, make sure you contact me. We'll take care of it. About 6 months later, I called my house manager asking for a favor. He says, well, I can't do that right now. He said, I'm babysitting. I said, you're babysitting? He goes, yeah, I've got Charlotte over here, the 3-year-old neighbor girl, because they developed a relationship. The guys in the house developed a relationship with their neighbors. In the 14 years that she owned that house, she never bought a lawnmower. She never owned a shovel. Our guys took care of it. They made sure that her lawn was mowed. They shoveled her sidewalks. Fast forward about 15 years, Charlotte is 17 years old, and she's going to her first prom. And her boyfriend came to pick her up, and her mom stood on the steps when her 11 brothers stood around her.
A little intimidating.
And said, she will be home by 1 a.m. Guys that live in sober houses, they want to be a part of a community. They deserve to have that respect. They deserve to have you can't just throw them down on Lake Street in Minneapolis. There's no reason that they don't have that. They should have an opportunity to live where they want to live, to experience life the way we experience life, to be good neighbors. We were involved in a public hearing in St. Paul when there was an issue with sober housing going into a particular neighborhood. And one of the neighbors said, well, when you have sober housing, you got all these cars, and when I get home, I have no place to park. How am I going to get my groceries in the house? And this young man stood up and he said, ma'am, I'm your neighbor. I live in the house next door. I live in that sober house. Come and knock on the door. We'll carry your groceries in for you. We'll move our car for you. So it is about being a good neighbor. And those are things that we work with our residents to make sure they understand how important that is. We don't want to be looked down at, or that we're putting a blight on a neighborhood. It's quite the opposite.
Randy, you said you're now the president of MASH?
Correct.
Any idea how many sober homes are in the state of Minnesota?
We don't have the exact amount. We have 165 homes as a member of Minnesota Association of Sober Homes, and we're guessing we have probably somewhere around 70%. We have 1,800 beds as members of MASH in Minnesota, and we're thinking we have probably about 70%. But there are some houses that start up that they don't register, they don't join MASH. They just operate. We believe as members of MASH, there's some things that we do, and we do it very well. Number one is we try to educate communities on what sober housing is and why it's important to allow them in your community. We train operators and sober house managers on how to operate a successful sober house. Their number one responsibility is uphold the integrity of the home. So the home will have integrity in the neighborhood, and they're going to be good neighbors. We
Do you offer any counseling then?
no, there is no direct services available within the house.
So your managers are just basically to manage the household?
Basically, yes, to make sure that, as far as curfews, make sure if there's any issues, any disagreements within the house. It's like having a big brother. It's like, Dan would be considered like the dad as the owner of the house. They have a big brother that kind of watches over the house and makes sure that everything runs smoothly. Just that there's somebody that has some oversight on what's going on. If there's a problem, we want to have somebody on site that can answer questions for a neighbor, or get a car moved if it needs to be. Things like that. That we want to make sure that we want to be good neighbors.
Steve, you have any questions, Randy?
And if Chris wants to talk first, because he said you might have something you want to add, then I do have a couple questions, if you don't mind.
My name's Chris Edrington. I own a company called St. Paul Sober Living. I have 10 sober houses in Minnesota and 2 in Colorado. I'm the past president of MASH, and I'm the current vice president of NAR, National Alliance of Recovery Residences. So all of the state affiliates like MASH, there's 33 of them, are members of NAR. So I'm a founding member of both boards. And I've also been doing sober housing, running houses since 2001. There are a million things we could get into. Happy to answer questions. I think what's really important to establish is that there's a whole legal realm of this thing about zoning laws and how many people can live unrelated people in one address, and zoning laws and township laws and neighborhood stuff and land use. And then there's sort of the social model, soft side of recovery that Minnesota's known for, and Minnesota is known nationally. I have a national program. I pull from all over the country for my program, and Minnesota, St. Paul, our Twin Cities area is known as one of the most vibrant sober communities in the entire country. That being said, in 2012, I was in federal court over a 10-bed house in Colorado. They wanted me at 6. I wanted 10. We ended up in federal court in December in 2012, Garfield County, Colorado versus St. Paul Sober Living. They violated the Fair Housing Act, and they had to award us $550,000 in damages because zoning laws versus federal Fair Housing Act doesn't really play. The argument that Randy was making has to do with what we call critical mass. Critical mass means what the therapeutic effect of a sober house is that there's people around. That you have these people supporting you. You come home from work, there's people home. You get up in the morning, there's people home. You can't sneak in the side door and go up to your room and stay by yourself, because community will save your life when you're trying to recover from addiction. It is the most powerful medicine there is to bring against the disease of addiction. We're in the middle of this opioid crisis. For us, it's been 10 years old, and for a lot of people, it's been on the news in the last 5. It's 20 years old for a lot of us. My point in saying that is, why would you set a zoning ordinance or something like that to interfere with one of the most effective things we've got against that addiction? That doesn't cost the county, the city, or the state a dime, because there's no county, federal, state money in this. This is private pay stuff. There are a few outpatient programs that contribute to those funds, but these are not funded beds. These are private pay beds. So I think it's really important to understand that the neighbors and this raising this limit to 10 in that particular house does not create a run in the whole neighborhood where everyone else wants to rent to 9 more people. And the last thing I will tell you, when I was in my federal case in Denver, my lawyer went up to somebody who was on the stand from the county and said, if I lived in that house with my wife and I had 8 kids, would that be okay? And the county commissioner said, yeah, that's fine, but not the alcoholics. 100% discrimination. And MASH and NAR are advocates for these laws all over the country. I've spoken at, I can't tell you how many of these town council meetings or city council meetings about the laws, which your lawyer brought up, the Fair Housing Act and the ADA, they work together in this sense. The sort of emotional plea about these guys need this, they do. I think it's really important to recognize that the people who enter sober houses are far down on the continuum of care and alcoholism. They are not coming from the street and homeless. These are people who have gone to treatment, have worked their way to a point where they voluntarily choose to go live in a sober house. So we're not talking about a bunch of people who don't want to be there, right? We don't necessarily provide that. Sure, we have our people who don't work out, they drink, they use, they have to leave. We have all kinds of stuff in place to help make the house work. I train sober house operators all over the country about how to run it well, and being a really good neighbor is a big part of that. So, any questions?
Well, Mike, now that you've said what you had to say, first off, and I can only speak for myself, I have no issue with the concept of the sober house. I think it's a well-meaning, well-run, well-approached process to help people that need that assistance. The struggle that I had, and it first off, before I get to that, you mentioned curfew. What is there? Is there curfews? You brought that up.
Typically, there's a curfew for the sober houses because what good are you doing past midnight anyway? So,
One of our governors used to say nothing good happens after 2 a.m. in the morning. So,
and that governor, one governor ago, was sober for a long time.
okay. So going back to where I was at, the concept I have isn't the issue. It's whether 5 is plenty or 10 is right, or maybe 17, 18, 20. So, I mean, it's all over the board, I guess.
Critical mass. If you look at the history, if you do some research, you're going to find 8, 9, 10 is the sweet spot.
Well,
When you get into more than that, you have to look at, I haven't seen how big Dan's house is, but I've known him for a long time and he runs a good operation. You get into life safety stuff. And we welcome the fire marshal. Come in and tell us, is there enough room for this many people? Are we crowding too many people and making it unsafe?
Dan, how long have you had 5 in this?
Since,
you came in with
June.
that June. You came in with that concept of 5, right?
Well, I came in with the concept of 10, but I was accepting 5 for right now.
Okay.
And there's 1,200 square feet in the basement that's not finished, that I'm still waiting for a permit to add 3 bedrooms and a bathroom in the basement.
Okay.
And the space is there. And then the driveway, it's a 3-car garage, and the driveway you can park, 6 vehicles in without
Non-stacked?
without sending.
Without stacking
No,
them?
they're stacked.
It's stacked, okay.
And it just makes them work together.
Right.
Right.
No, I get it.
Makes them talk to each other.
What else can see?
Oh, that's it for right now.
Anybody have any other questions?
I think you might have already touched base on this, and I just wanted to percolate a little bit further. I think you said that I think I heard that there's no counseling that goes on, but it's therapeutic, there's a critical mass, and just at the risk of simplifying, is it just guys kind of providing a pat on the back to make sure that things don't go off the rails?
It's a little more interesting than that, but I would say that when you go to primary care treatment, say you went to get your knee surgery and you had to have the surgeon there who makes, who's only person who can do that, and then the nurses take care of you for a while, and then you go to physical therapy, and the surgeon isn't there anymore. And that's why physical therapy costs about 1/30 of that. So when you get to continuum of care from, like, say, Hazelden, down to maybe what used to be called a halfway house, there's sort of extended care treatment, light options around someplace, and then sober living, the clinical work is stripped out. You're done with the surgeon. You're done with the clinical work of chemical dependency. And the social model takes over. The social model is as important, in my opinion, more effective long-term than the treatment. Treatment's triage. If you talk to William White, who writes all of the books that Hazelden uses, he will tell you treatment is triage, recovery lives in the community. So when you get into that social model and you're modeling after people ahead of you, and AA is one of our biggest tools, our community itself is 10 times the size of the AA community. It is an enormous supportive community. So yes, the therapeutic benefit of being in the house is with the other men who are ahead of you, support you. You see people fail, you're like, I don't want to do that. You see people succeed, you're like, I want that. There's nothing more important than that in modeling. Okay? And that's the therapeutic value.
One more question, sorry. You had mentioned that you've spoken all over the place and you listed one experience. I was just curious, other communities, I'm guessing we're not the only community that has said, hey, our zoning says 5 unrelated people.
Almost all of them.
Okay, and so this is something that you continually are discussing with others.
100%. And text amendments happen all the time. And you don't have a definition for sober living, as you said. I learned what text amendments and definitions are a million times. I could till I was blue in the face. But the reality is, you could call it a super double secret probation certificate and give it to Dan, and he'll go run his sober house. We could give it whatever you want to call it, special permission. Theoretically, under the law, we don't have to accept a special condition permit. We are allowed to do it, and we can do it under the Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. And if you look up the case history, I wouldn't go to court with it. We would win. But we don't want to fight. We just want you guys to look at the history and see. But I think once anybody really understands, especially neighbors, I've had a lot of open houses at my sober houses when neighbors got upset, and then once they found out what really went on there, because what they thought it was made them mad. When they found out what it was really like, and Randy was telling some stories of that, generally it's like, oh, okay, I get it, it's cool.
I'm done, thank you.
Just a couple things. Do you require them to go to AA meetings?
Typically, yes.
Also-
Almost every program does.
All at the same time?
More the better, but you can't. But generally speaking, in groups, yeah, in mass. Things like we don't allow, not everybody does this, but some don't allow second shift jobs because then they can all go together. Just depends on the population that you have, the demographic that you have.
And then I take a little bit of a battle with this. If you have 8 kids, that's fine. I don't know of 8 kids that stay home and are all driving, so that's a little bit different scenario that doesn't kind of
Right.
apply to this, but
From our statistics, 50% of the people never have a car anyway. So we're really talking about 5.
When I started in the city of Maplewood, they gave me a lodger's license. And they said it was 1 to 12 rooms. And it was $128 a year. And they would come out and do a fire inspection and count the beds and look at the house. And then the city attorney changed. I think it was the second time the city attorney changed for the city of Maplewood. They came up with a sober house permit process.
well, I don't know the count of how many halfway houses the township has, but I do know they're usually a source of contention with neighbors. Now, I'm not saying this is the same. I'm saying,
not.
I understand, you made your spiel, but I am saying, if there is an issue and the residents are going to look at this board, that we approved another aspect of something we already have that we're having some problems with, I don't feel real comfortable doing that. But I'm curious too, that I have to refer to the attorney now, because when I hear lawsuits taking us to court, fighting zoning ordinances, I'm sorry, I step way back. And I'd like to hear what Chad has to say. I mean, now you've heard this presentation. Does it change anything that we've talked about?
Not a bit. As I stated before in my memo, alcoholism is a disability, and under the statutes I've cited, accommodations should be made. The question is, what are the proper accommodations so that the person receives the right therapy? To say that you have an unconditional right to any amount you have is completely incorrect. That's not supported by the law.
I didn't say that.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
That's exactly what you said.
You mean to how many
Don't
numbers of,
interrupt me.
you mean to how many numbers of beds?
Don't interrupt me.
Listen,
You already
you don't
threatened
need
us
to
with.
get
You already
contentious
threatened
with
us
me,
with.
man.
No, we.
I didn't start like that.
You've already started it.
I did not.
You've already
start
started it.
The chair is going to award the floor.
of this because that's not true.
The chair is going to award the floor to whoever is
That's
speaking
cool.
right now. So
Well, let's just
do that.
stipulate that
Let's
that is
do that.
true.
I tell you what,
That is
gentlemen,
not
if you'd like to take a seat, I think we've heard everything we need to hear from you guys. I just want a last response from our attorney before this board decides on the matter.
Again, there's no question that sober houses are allowed. And there's no question that in your zoning code, they can exist. That's not the point. The point is, you've placed a limit of 5 unrelated individuals. The question is, can a sober house operate? Can it achieve its purpose at that limit of 5? If it can't, then we have to look at that. That's the point. But at this point in time, I've heard nothing that says that you need more than 5
Well, and I think only because
with a threat.
if the state of Minnesota is regulating all the communities at that number, I see no reason to try to reinvent the wheel here. Now, any other questions from the board? Pat? All right, hearing none.
Something to the number of people in my house?
What's that?
Can I say something to the number of?
Come on up. 2 minutes, and then we got to move on here.
One of the things with only having 3, 4, 5 people in a house, when you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bedrooms, if guys come home and they go in their bedroom, then nobody else is around and they're by themselves. And that's where the therapeutic part doesn't happen. When there's more people in the home and somebody comes home and I'm staring at the floor and just kind of kicking rocks and somebody said, Dan, how you doing? Because they're sitting on the couch because there's more people there.
But Dan, don't you have a community area where they all, isn't bedrooms just usually for go to bed, sleep? You have a community area where these guys congregate?
Yeah, but it helps when there's more people around. It helps when there's more people coming and going. When different people work, early mornings or midday, or somebody's at work or somebody's at treatment. It helps when there's that 5, 6, or 7 number, because it's not always going to be 10.
But that's true, but you kind of reinforced our argument about cars now. It sounds like everybody's working now. We've got 10 cars moving through, so that it doesn't help us with our situation of okaying this.
I've had 5 guys in that house in 2 cars, and 2 of the guys had bicycles, and they worked at the holiday station down the street. And the holiday station loves us because he's going to continue to get more employees.
Well, just to reiterate what Steve said, it's a great idea and it's a great concept. And I applaud you for it. And you guys, it seems like you do a hell of a job. But thank you. All right, what's the pleasure of the board? We have 2 options here.
From my perspective, I don't really think it's necessary to change the ordinance. I think based on what I've read from our attorney, the size as dictated by the state for group homes is 5. And we can accommodate whether it's sober house or others with 5. I don't see any reason to change. I'm not comfortable changing the ordinance, to be
All right, Scott, anything else? No. All right, I need a motion.
Well, if I may, I think we should have at least some findings. And the question is, can a sober house achieve its objective of treating individuals suffering from alcoholism at a level of 5? That is the question. And if the board feels that that is possible, that therapy can be, or not, I'll withdraw the word therapy because you don't have therapy, but that if you can achieve your purpose at the level of 5, then it would stand. But again, I agree that we have to accommodate. The question is, what's the proper number of accommodation?
Yeah. So with that reasoning, I think, Randy, you pointed out that you have one house that has 4. Obviously, whether it's 4 or 5, well, I had written down 12, 7, and 4, but whether it's 11, 7, or something.
No, the 4 and the 7 are 2 doors apart.
But they're separate houses.
They're always together.
Okay,
Yeah.
but
For therapy.
they could be 2 separate sober houses, one with 7, one with 4. So from that perspective, and the finding that we meet, in our opinion, meet the letter, I moved that we stay with the ordinance as written.
Do I have a second on the motion?
I'll second.
All right, motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. I appreciate your enthusiasm, gentlemen. All right, moving on. We have no added agenda items. We do have an open time. If anyone wants to speak through open time? Hearing none, I need a motion to receive agenda materials and supplements.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And then I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Motion's made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 7:53.
Thanks, folks.